very tough because my left ankle was caught in the pedals, or what was left of them. And so I started wriggling out of the car as best I could. And it wasn't running very well. I couldn't free the leg up. And so I decided, and this was another decision, this was a more sane decision, that I would break my ankle to get out of the car if it hadn't burst into flames yet. And in those days, cars burned, you know, it was kind of a scary thing. So I got part of my torso out of the car, or what was left of it. And when I was just getting there, I thought the car shifted onto my chest. And I thought I was done for, but it turned out it shifted just little enough that I was able to scramble out and went for a long walk in the woods. Not totally in shock. It was a beautiful fall day with yellow leaves and just spectacular. And I can't imagine what it was like being back in the pits, wondering where the hell I was. Because, I mean, there was where do you escape from the track? You just don't do it. So the guys in the pits just waited out, and it was like half an hour I was out there in the woods. And they got more and more puzzled. Could he have somehow escaped the bridge, somehow gotten up there? Had someone come and taken the car away by a crane? So now here comes the part that fascinates me most in hindsight. And I might say quickly that a friend of mine had a Lotus 7 Mullen, and he offered me a ride in the car and said, you know, the old cliche about a horse, if you fall off, you should get back and ride it again. And he gave me his car to drive, the Lotus 7, and I'll never forget it. This is where your mind works their strange tricks. I don't remember much about the crash, but I can remember exactly what his Lotus 7 was like. And it had a little square tachometer with an electric thing, and that was his car. And I broke the time record for his class, the first lap around, and it was so incredibly rewarding. I didn't even see the bank. I concentrated so much on the line. And it shows you how intense you can be about things. But what happened next was an interesting choice I faced, because with the next Can-Am was Laguna Seca the next week. And so we had to decide what to do. We had a wrecked car and one back in the shop that was partially finished. My choices were to try to finish that car in time to go to Laguna with the car, buy a car from Mike Goff, who was a time, I'm sure you remember him, Skip, here in Blacklaw, and that was for sale. Or forget the whole thing and go back and try to come up the next year with something that really worked. And I went back to my room at my house, and nobody was there. They were all in New York. And I sat in my bathtub and thought to myself, you know, you could get killed doing this. That was the first time I thought of that. So I decided to go ahead and get the broken car as a parts car for the one that was partly finished. When I called Ray Caldwell and said that was my decision, and he said, that's fine, they do their very best. I got back to Marblehead and just stopped at the shop. It was after midnight, and all of the team was working on that car. And they never stopped, and it got on the plane and got flown out to Monterey, and I qualified at the very back because I only had a lap or two. But when the race started, I dropped out of the lead group because I had some sort of thing wrong with the car. It was minor, a plug lead or something. Jack McLemore fixed it in about 10 seconds. And so I went back out on the track. The pack was all halfway around. And I had a completely open track right in front of me. I was so angry and so depressed and so just crazed that I drove the car really fast. And I ignored the shaking of the wheel and all the problems. And Laguna had a first and second turn complex. It was brutally fast if you really had the nerve. And I had the nerve that day. It never failed me. So I did a lap that was the lap record until midway through the race when Bruce McLaren equaled it. But that's the closest anybody got to me in the speed department. So it was quite an adventure and something I remember very fondly now. But at the time it was hysteria, really. Every moment was just incredible to live through. So that's that. Now I have a cheerier story if you'd like to hear it. It has a good ending here.
Want me to hold it for you?
Sure, thanks. This is a story about how things can go so well it's scary.
You know, we can hear you.
We started,
Yep.
the story starts at Monaco where ABC was covering the Formula One race. And the feed to New York was, whatever it was, it wasn't over till about midnight. So we went back to the room and got everything packed because I had a helicopter standing by to take me to Nice, which it did at 4 in the morning. And the first thing I found out when I got to Nice was my connecting flight to Paris was, I think it was Charles de Gaulle in those days, was out of business. We weren't going to get there in time. And that threw everything off. But then miraculously, the clouds cleared and we took off and everything. We landed in Paris, and the plane pulled in the gate next to the Concorde, and they waited for me, which was incredible. Air France was the motivating force behind all the good things that happened. So I get on the Concorde and we fly to New York, and I had a friend standing by outside of the international terminal there, and he was there to drive me about 3 miles to the helicopter base there at JFK. And I figured I didn't want to have see a taxi line, see the whole thing being flushed down the toilet because of that. So he drove me this 2 miles or whatever it was, and that was his role in the whole thing. And I got in the helicopter and we started off, and the guy said, you know, I really don't know where Lime Rock is. I said, well, I'll guide you, you know. So I looked down and I found 684 and I saw it landed at 22. But here I'm basically flying his chopper for him. So we arrived in Sharon. Then, as now, you land a private helicopter, medical only, right? I think that's it. And I think that extended to Sharon, but nobody ever cares down there. So, my mother had a chocolate milkshake ready for me, which I downed quickly and got in. This trooper was standing by to race me over here, siren going and everything. And we got here, and I made a couple of laps in practice, changing into my suit just as fast as I've ever done it, just so blended into the thing. And when I was ready, the car was already out by the pits. I ran over and got in it, and there was something wrong with it. Again, part of the story, some sort of loose plug or something. Obviously not very technical about this. Most of you would know exactly what it was, but anyway. So I started from the back of the pack, about 20 cars, was up 5 or 6 places on the first lap, and a few more on the next lap, and then I got to the lead group about 3 or 4 laps into the race. This was with a 240Z Nissan, or the Datsun in those days. Wonderful handling car, and just the right thing for this track. Well, it happened that Don Devendorf was the guy who would be champion of that series that year. A terrific driver, engineer, and kind of Mark Donahue-esque figure, and certainly one I feared at every race. But for some reason, and again, here's where luck plays an unbelievable role, his car was not quite right. And I don't remember really if I ever knew whether it was a handling problem or an engine problem, but it was keeping the other fast cars up just enough for me to pick them off one at a time until I was right behind him, and I passed him and took the lead. And then I realized I was so dazed by the whole experience that I couldn't feel the car underneath me. I couldn't feel the balance of the car. So I drove it by memory and by sight only. Sort of, well, there's a turn, there's another turn, keep concentrating. And we won, of course, and that was just fantastic. We all went back to my mom's cottage and started drinking. And I think we continued the drinking indefinitely. I woke up in the morning and there was still a couple of corpses lying around. So anyway, that's my happy story.
Any questions? Sam's willing. Skip.
Is Mike Grand still here? Hey, is it true that for years, Mike was the track manager for a long time, you could see the rivets from Sam's car high up in a tree?
Yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah, seriously.
Bush Sherwood
Straight ahead,
got up there and
we
saw
rebuilt that
those
corner.
up close and personal.
When we rebuilt the corner, we were out there looking and absolutely, you can see the scars on the bark and the drip. Yeah, it is your tree.
There should be a flag on that.
We could give Sam a bill.
Or you could reflect on the fact that the tree gained something to nurture it. Those top rivets were very, very good for that.
Were they high up?
Car, I should quickly say, not to overlook Ray's contribution, because Ray has, over the years, I think, gotten sort of a bad rap, which he totally undeserved, because if we'd had the money to go the next year, I'm confident we could have erased. We really had one serious problem, and that was it. And we just didn't have the time to track it down completely. And so Ray never got the credit he deserved, but I believe that he saved my life because of the construction of the car. It had two sort of like beams that flared out a little bit at the front and tapered in to hold the engine at the back. And the beams were filled with foam, so they were incredibly rigid. And when we were dragging the car out of the woods, I noticed that they weren't even dented. And here's the rest of the car totally wrecked. And so I really, I think it's something sort of awkward to bring up, you know, in the middle of what? Say, let me tell you about the beams on my car. They were there and they saved me.
Sam, you said that had I think you said it had a bump steer problem in the front. It had a live front axle, didn't it?
Yes, it did, and a live rear axle as well. A sort of the Dion tube, but out of tubes. Yeah, we tried everything, including a Volkswagen steering system, what other things, we did a bunch of things to it in effort to, we got to a point where, because the car darted from side to side unpredictably, you couldn't take an apex because it wouldn't, you couldn't be sure that the car was going to go where you pointed it. And we tried everything that we could think of and never came up with it. At one point I had loosened the steering from that sort of shaft that the steering bolts into, that flange. And so the car, going back and forth, wouldn't be translated into my hands, and would give me confidence to have this thing rattling around. But that's how desperate we were, and it was a shame because it was so close. And I was very proud of my role in the thing, which was the aerodynamics. I worked Professor Eugene Larrabee, who was an aerodynamicist at MIT, and he actually built us a wind tunnel right there in his apartment with 100 straws and a fan. And damned if we didn't find out a few basic things about aerodynamics. I'll never forget any of them. It was so useful to me. And when we first brought the car out, it was for the Road America, and we were very proud of polishing and everything. And Bruce McLaren came down in a fury, and he said, "Where did you get those drawings for that nose? Who did you copy them from?" And we said, "We didn't copy them from anybody." And his car was identical to ours, absolutely to the quarter inch. And what it was a prevailing knowledge, body of knowledge at that time, and McLaren and us both tapped into it and had an identical part of the car. Unfortunately, the rest of the car